Okay, good morning. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and it is Thursday, January 15th. And we are starting the morning with S202 about portable solar. And so we have a number of utilities to hear from this morning. And yes, we're going to start with Mr. Nolan. Welcome.
Hi.
Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee, for hearing today. Thank you for letting me go first. I'm actually in-house energy in 15 minutes.
Fair enough.
Appreciate the accommodation.
Sure.
For the record, I'm Ken Nolan. I'm the General Manager of Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. For those who don't know, VEPSA was actually created by the legislature back in 1979, specifically to help public power communities, the small municipal utilities really don't have the staffing to operate on their own. We act as their back office in a lot of the regulatory and legislative issues. My comments today are going to be fairly brief, reiterating some things you heard earlier this week. I want to start off by saying we are very intrigued by the new technology you're working on. We're interested in any way possible to get renewable energy in the hands of consumers in an affordable way. So we're anxious to work with you on the bill. We do have a couple of concerns, a couple of specific areas we'd like to keep working on. First one is utility worker safety. But we acknowledge the bill has provisions for a disconnect device. We don't really see that as being enforceable. We don't think the UL certification or listing is going to be sufficient to make sure that devices actually do disconnect from the grid during outages. Without a specific enforcement mechanism, we're very concerned that their worker safety will be an issue, especially given that the bill really, the only notice provisions really happen after the device has already been connected to the system. So you've already got a potential problem that then you're trying to undo, where the consumer's already spent the money. So we see that as the potential weakness. The second area is more around the definitions on the grid exports. We're very appreciative that the bill explicitly says units don't qualify for net metering, but we believe it still leaves some ambiguity as to whether there's any compensation due. So we would prefer very explicit language as to what that compensation is, or the bill to say there is none, if that is the intent. I'd also note on the unit size, the language in the bill now references maximum power output to the electric grid of not more than 1,200 watts. That implies that the device can be large enough to serve the whole building load, plus an additional 1,200 watts, which really raises some questions about exporting to the grid and how that's going to work. We prefer that the bill set the minimum or the maximum size without regard to whether power is exported, so that everyone is clear as to what can actually be put on. That's a little bit of my comments this morning. I think in general, the bill is a good starting place. There's a couple of thorny issues to work through, and we're looking forward to continuing conversation as you review and amend. Happy to answer questions.
I do have a few questions. Appreciating all of your suggestions. Those are great, and trying to figure out how to materialize those. So one possibility is that we could, because in the definition is where it says you can't export more than 1,200 watts. So one thought is that we could say that the device itself is no more than, we may end up with two levels, like a 1,200 watt threshold and a 391 watt threshold, just because of the UL 700. But we could just define there's these two thresholds and different things have to happen for the two thresholds. And then later we could also say in combination you can't export more than the 1,200 watts. Would that?
I think that would help.
That would help. Okay. Okay, so that's good. And then the question about compensation is, I think it's a really interesting one, so if, do you all use smart meters?
We're installing them now.
Oh, you are, okay, so right, as of, or like, let's say this was last year, if somebody had one of these, if this was possible, and they had just had an analog meter, their meter's just gonna run backwards.
Correct.
And in that sense, if that were to happen, if that was the case, would you, how, I guess you would have potentially no way to see how much was generated. It would, to you, it would just look like the meter had run more slowly.
Right, you would end up seeing zero usage, and after a time, the utility would ask the customer what's going on.
Right.
It's an after the fact conversation.
Right, okay, and so in that situation, no compensation would mean what would no compensation look like for you in that situation?
Yeah, I think our concern is that Vermont already has a very complex net metering program.
Mhm.
And it's not something you can get a standard customer billing system to handle. We have to pay to customize all the calculations to determine compensation for net metering projects. Our concern is, does this create yet another tier in net metering that we're gonna have to then go and figure out how to compensate? So our preference would be that the customer is free to reduce their load as much as they want. But if they're exporting to the grid, there's no compensation for that.
And in that case, if someone's meter is just moving more slowly, they would be billed for what they did use, and that's it.
That's
the end.
whatever they generated themselves, they would not receive a bill for, they would just be what the utility is providing.
Okay, and in the case of if you have smart meters that are giving you an hourly update, so you can see, oh, in this hour, you did actually export to the grid. It would be helpful if we said there is no compensation for that hour of excess generation, but all the other times, if their load is reduced, that is still to the customer's benefit.
Correct.
Okay,
I mean, during those hours when they're exporting, their utility usage would essentially be zero, wouldn't be no bill for those hours. And the bill would relate to just the hours that they're using electric energy from the grid.
and so that would incentivize customers to not have more generation than what they would expect their building to use.
Correct.
Okay, yes.
So I'm retired from absence. The putting in explicitly that there's no compensation, how is that different than saying that they don't qualify for net metering? How are you worried that people might expect compensation back?
We've had conversations on net metering in the past about when you're exporting to the grid, which program you actually qualify for.
Okay,
And by just saying it's not in net metering, I can envision conversations about, well, should I be compensated at the retail rate? Should I be compensated something less than the
Oh, I
retail rate? Should you pay me wholesale prices because I'm actually reducing the utility power costs? And I think it's better to just, if you want them to receive compensation, then to explicitly say that. And if you don't, then say that as well, because
Okay.
when language is vague.
yeah, no, that's fair. Vague language is problematic in legislation. I guess I'm concerned about actually the word compensation, because and maybe it's just compensation from whom for what, because people using these would be compensated with more energy. You know what I mean? So I think I hear you about clarity, and I also just want to make it sure that it's because the whole point of these is that people would be able to get quote unquote free energy, and so I don't want them to think, oh well, actually the energy I'm not gonna get.
And I don't disagree. I think we are very much in favor if the customer generates at their home themselves,
Yeah,
they should receive the benefit of that.
right, okay.
The
Maybe-
challenge comes in is with what they're sending to the utility, what they're exporting, they should receive no compensation.
So no compensation from the utility is maybe the way that we, and then on the safety thing, I just wondered if you could, in the bill. There's the UL certification on page 2. And then I think there's something else about. Building safety code, fire and safety codes on page 3.
Right.
What else are you looking for?
So there's on the line at the on line 5 of page 2.
Mhm.
Says includes a feature that prevents the system from energizing the building's electrical system during a power outage.
Okay,
That is good. Our concern is that there's no way to verify. And with net metering systems, any of these generators that are required to get a state permit
mhm,
have to go through a process where they show they've got a disconnect. If
mhm.
there's a power outage, that the generator cannot put power back on the grid.
Mhm.
The concern here is there's no permitting, there's no really notice provision until after it's already installed.
Mhm.
Therefore, from our mind, there's no way to really prove that the device cannot put power back into the electric grid. Which
Okay.
during an outage becomes a safety issue.
Yeah. I totally hear that, and I'm wondering if it's sort of a requirement for manufacturers. You know, if we're trying to do these things without going through that long permitting process, is there a way to? I think that's what the UL certification is, and this could be.
But the UL certification, to my knowledge, and I'm not a UL expert, my understanding is it's just not explicitly include that requirement.
Right, no, I understand that, but I guess sort of making sure that these, if they're gonna be sold in Vermont, have a feature that does this. And I don't know who certifies that, if it's UL or if it's somebody else, but so that the customer doesn't have to do it, it's something that's already built into the product that they're buying.
That would be valid. I mean, our main concern is the safety issue.
Yeah.
Making sure that we're not caught in a place where the customer thought they complied and we have somebody get injured in repairing a line because there was a disconnect.
Of course, obviously, that is clear, so, okay, thanks.
I know, you gotta go. I have more questions, but we're gonna give them a lot of utilities.
Yes. Others can dive deeper. I'm sure they can cover the issue, but
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Yes, appreciate your time. Okay. All right, so next, Mr. Porter.
Great,
Welcome.
good morning.
Morning.
For the record, Louis Porter, Washington Electric Co-op. And I have with me Kevin Crawford, who is our Department of Energy Fellow, which means we get the benefit of his work and the DOE pays for it. So we're very grateful to him and to them for that, but I thought it would be useful for him to see the legislative part of what we do. I'm gonna try to not go over a lot of things you've already heard. You have a lot of witnesses. I'll just say I agree with everything that Ken Nolan and Betsa said. I also agree with everything the department said in their testimony, including that. So I think we need to be careful in overstating the amount that this is a solution either for low income Vermonters or for greenhouse gases reduction. Washington Electric doesn't oppose the bill, is fine with us provided that we have the safety components that Ken mentioned, the consumer education and protection provisions are in place properly, and that any excess export is not compensated. And so I'll talk to you very briefly about some of these things. Happy to answer any questions about them, but you've heard from others and you will hear from more on most of them. There's one piece I do want to highlight. As Ken said, it's very important to us to make sure that the the inverters in these cut off, if there's a loss of power to the grid. We also think it's very important that the entire system be, studied by UL Laboratories and as they call them, UL Solutions now, and that the entire system be vetted by them, not just component parts. And last, you heard the issue about making it clear that any excess generation is not in net meter. That's kind of the trade-off in my mind between not going through the permitting process, is that it's not a net metering system and there's not compensation. Through the net metering CPG process, we have the opportunity to know where these things are, to make sure they're not going to have an impact on the grid, to make sure that they're installed and wired in correctly. And without those, we think it's reasonable to have them not be exporting. It also will make sure that the size is restricted to, the usage of a house at any one time, because people won't put in systems and don't throw over systems. The one thing I did want to emphasize is that I would ask that you consider putting in a line that makes it clear that issues around these do not go through the consumer protection process at the Department of Public Safety Service. And the reason I suggest that is we not infrequently have disputes with our members that net meter over whether we are metering properly or not, whether they're getting compensated at the correct amount or not, whether they are located and sized appropriately. And some of these disagreements end up being quite expensive. We just spent $20,000 in a year-long process with a net meterer. That's $20,000 that the rest of Washington Electric co-op members are paying to adjudicate a dispute with a member who's not covering the cost of providing electric service to their house because they're a net meter. So not only are they relying on their neighbors to pay for the cost of providing electrical service, they're now also incurring costs on the rest of the members for solving these disputes. The consumer protection statutes would still protect them. They still would have access to the consumer protection system through the Attorney General's office, and should have that. And if you wanted to make that clear, we'd be fine with that. But I think it's important that they not go through the CAPI DPS consumer process, because that's really set up to deal with systems and generators that are through a CPG and that have rules on them and on us through that process that we can then adjudicate through DPS. This is kind of outside the DPS process. And I also think DPS is limited in their ability to deal with the manufacturers and retailers of these systems, because they don't go through a CPG, they're not licensed, they're not utilities, they're not otherwise regulated by DPS. So if you're going to be outside of regulation, that should be outside of the regulatory system. We're fine with it if you are. But I think that the AG's Consumer Protection Office is the appropriate place to deal with disputes after that, not CAP. So the last thing I just want to mention is I think you're have had a conversation about not co-locating these with net metering. And I think that's important, because if you had a net metering system that gone through a CPG, was producing power onto the grid, that produced say a 10 kW system, and then somebody put one of these in addition, we would have no way to separate those two things out from each other, and that person would be in violation of their CPG because they would be producing too much power under their CPG. So I think it's important that these be separate from net metering systems. I don't know why anybody would put up a net metering system and have one of these. Like, it would seem to me like you would go and upsize your net metering system and amend your CPG instead, because then you would get paid for the excess generation. But I do think it's important that they not be co-located with that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about this that I can.
I forgive my ignorance. This process you were talking about, where if there's a dispute regarding net metering and it goes through a process with DPS, the word that you used for it, CAPE.
Yeah.
Was that an acronym?
Yeah, it's the Consumer Protection Division within DPS. And those are the folks who resolve all of the issues we have with members, whether it's billing or timeliness of our work or speed in which we answer the telephone. We're very, very highly regulated in Vermont. And they adjudicate all of those disputes that occur within the regulated utility system. This is outside of that system, and I think it's proper that any disputes and consumer protection issues happen separately as well.
Suppose that, so it is possible for one of these devices to self-limit to not export to the grid. That technology exists where like, if it was going to export to the grid, it can just not.
It is, there is.
That exists.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about this last situation where you were talking about people, co-locating these devices with existing net metering systems. Suppose that you had one that just did not export, that just, itself limited to.
Yeah, so you could have a system that didn't export, but I think it's asking a lot of the consumer to know whether the version they're buying is exporting or not exporting. And I think I'm definitely not an electrical engineer, but I think it would be very difficult I don't know that they make those. The ones I've seen cut off if the grid shuts down. Which is great, but they don't necessarily cut off if there's another generator on the same house.
Have to ask about
I
that.
mean, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Louis, but for most people that are in net metering, they export a significant percentage of what they produce to the grid already.
Right,
Yeah, okay,
yeah, when they're producing, they're exporting a lot because
yeah,
we don't produce much in the winter, we don't produce at night, obviously, don't produce in the mornings or the evenings very well. So they export a lot.
and then I don't know if it's true, the number I've heard is they export typically 80% to the grid.
I don't know, but I would not be surprised if that's right. And I don't think you're gonna have people who want to do this. Who wanna have these and net metering. I think they would either build a net meter system big enough, or they would expand their net meter system if they wanted to, and this would be a drop in the bucket compared to the typical net meter system. So I don't think it'll be an issue, but I just don't want somebody to accidentally be in violation of their CPG.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense if you're exporting, why would you add?
Right.
Just with it, shut it down.
Exactly.
Makes sense, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Further question, something that you did not mention, that hasn't been mentioned yet, part of this bill is about. Well, you did mention that it's useful for you to know where these devices are, so that continues to be accurate, so there's a process by which if somebody gets one of these, that they need to, let their distribution utility know.
Yeah, I would, oh, sorry.
No, you go.
I would get rid of that section. I don't wanna know. So we in the utility world work hard, and net metering has made this challenging, but we work hard to separate what's on our side of the meter from what's on the member side of the meter. And when our folks go out, obviously, if they see something dangerous on the member side of the meter, we're gonna address it with them. But generally, we don't have visibility or control over what's on their side of the meter, and we don't really want it. Because that's their house, it's their business, and in Vermont, you can wire in your own house without a license. My electrician has asked me not to do that anymore. But you can do it, and so we kind of try to keep a line at the meter. And I think if these systems are gonna be outside of the regulatory space and outside of our control and management, then I think they should be outside, but I can understand fully the reason for including that, because it makes sense to, it makes sense on the face of it, that the utility would wanna know, but the reality is. People are gonna be buying these and plugging them in, they're not gonna be telling us. And I would rather not know where any of them are than know where some of them are, if that makes sense.
Fair enough.
I mean, that makes sense. It's not like we tell them they have to tell you if they get a generator or if they get a big stereo system or something that's gonna eat a bunch of electricity. I don't know.
We do ask them to tell us if they get an EV, there's not an enforceable provision, but that's really so they don't blow a transformer up and cost all of us so much money.
Right.
And most people do that, and we will soon have better tools even to know when that's happening, so we can proactively reach out to the member.
And you're anticipating that if people plug these in, if there was reasonable uptake of these, it's not gonna blow up a transformer.
It would be, I mean, you'd have to have, certainly not in my territory, we don't have apartment buildings in my territory, basically, so, certainly not in my territory. I guess there's a potential if you had a dormitory or an apartment building where they were a lot of these, every single person had one. Possibly, but even so, I think it would be hard, it's a pretty small.
Great. Any further questions? Okay,
Thank
super.
you so much.
Thank you. Okay. And so moving on to Ms. Morgan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I had a cold last week and the only symptoms remaining is I don't have much of a voice, but I feel totally fine. So I will say as little as possible. All right, I appreciate Candace Morgan from Green Mountain Power for the record. Appreciate the time this morning on this bill and also sharing the concept along the way in the summer and the fall was really helpful for our team to take a look at this technology, see what other states are doing and kind of have a good sense coming into the session, how we want to respond. So appreciate that. I want to echo what both Mr. Nolan and Mr. Porter said this morning, and agree with them that Green Mountain Power is, we are supportive of the bill, appreciate what it's trying to do related to creating a streamlined process and making sure that we're not adding any kind of undue burden to customers that are interested in this technology. But really do want to emphasize the safety considerations as well as the consumer awareness piece. I think the safety concerns that both Mr. Nolan and Mr. Porter outlined are critical to keep in the bill around the UL certification. So the provision that prevents any feeding to the grid in the event of an outage, and that's really for our worker safety. I think it's important to continue to have in there. The consumer education piece, I want to emphasize some of what you just heard from Washington Electric. We also work with our customers at the time who have net metered systems and might have some questions about the billing process and what they are billed for versus what compensated for, depending on the time of year and how those systems are generating. I think if you were to add a portable solar device, I don't think it's going to be a widespread thing for all the reasons you just talked about. But it creates another level of distinction between what we would be seeing on the bill for usage versus what the customer might be seeing for generation. And I think it's important to emphasize that point because it could just get into more disputes about what is being compensated for what. So a potential point of clarity, just to say, if you have an existing net metering system, you can have a portable solar system as well. But I think it's worth exploring what the right resolution is there. On the billing side of things, and this is where I think getting into some of the consumer protection and understanding is really important too. If you were to install one of these systems at your house, essentially your bill would just look like you have less usage, right? And so from our perspective, it would look like you installed a more efficient refrigerator or we're doing something that, is changing that. And that's great and, support that for customers that choose to exercise this option. But there's not going to be a great record or any record of production. And so when manufacturers claiming that you'll get payoff in some number of years, there's not really going to be a way to confirm that just based on how the technology is working. And that's where I do think it comes into the consumer awareness and the Attorney General's office is definitely more equipped to handle how they are marketed and how they're communicated about to customers than the Department of Public Service. So I want to really emphasize the point that Mr. Porter just raised about the right place, because these are really more like appliances than anything else, and not in the sort of utility regulatory structure in the way that other technology for solar and renewables are. Let me think if there's anything else I wanted to hit. Those are really the main points that I really wanted to emphasize that, and like I said, agree with the testimony that you've heard this far from folks this morning, as well as from the department and the Public Utility Commission. we're really wanting to keep an eye, out into the future where if a lot of customers have these, there could just be a lot of questions out performance and everything, so wanting to get out ahead and create the right system for that, like to answer those questions versus relying on, you know, utility call center folks or the public service for those questions. And then have to answer any questions.
I'm gonna ask you the same question.
Sure.
Just wanna confirm that do you not wanna know where these are?
Well, it's a great question, and if you asked multiple people on our team, I might get multiple answers, right? And so I think I can understand the points that Mr. Porter raised around, we don't know what you're plugging into your home, generally speaking, right? And there are some pretty well tread rules and like liability considerations based on that line of demarcation behind the meter or in front of the meter. So I don't wanna blur that line, and I think it is an interesting question about if we know, do we have an obligation, that the other ones would not? So it might be a good follow-up question for the PUC too, in terms of what they would want to understand is out there. And I'm happy to follow up if we feel strongly one way or another, but I think the consensus you'll feel here this morning is maybe that we don't want to know. And I think that's a reasonable outcome. I'll follow up if we
Okay,
feel.
but just to say, if
Yeah.
we could, if there was agreement, and I wanna know,
Mhm.
cause I value your input on this, but if there was agreement that it's not necessary to know, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Because that would make it even that much easier for a consumer,
Mhm.
right, that would, so that's very interesting.
Yeah.
But I hear you that we should check with the PUC.
Yeah, I was gonna say that same thing, you all think, and your sort of, these are more like appliances
Yeah.
than utilities, I think was an interesting, that was
Mhm.
helpful
Mhm.
comparison, it's like a more efficient refrigerator.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if that's the case, it would seem like you wouldn't wanna know, because you don't ask people to tell you when they're getting a new fridge. But yeah, that would be a burden on everyone.
It would.
So that would be helpful. Yeah, if the answer is like, yeah, we want to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? So, and again, just to confirm, you would appreciate a line that was like, in the event of excess generation, there will be no compensation for that power.
Yes. Sure. Yeah, I agree with the discussion on that.
Okay.
I also mentioned to a teammate that to make sure to say, I was doing a little bit of reading on this, thought the white paper from the Clean Energy States Alliance on Tuesday was super helpful.
Yes.
And my favorite part about that was that in Germany, in IKEA, they sell these systems and they're called Kraftwerk, and I just really like the name of that, so that was I wanted to make sure I said that today, so that's what I.
Amazing, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, who's going? Hello, good morning.
Hi.
Thank you for having us in today. For the record, my name is Andrea Cohen. I'm from Electric Cooperative. And I too wanted to start by saying that we really appreciate the early engagement on this, that early heads up of we're thinking about doing this. Do you have any initial, really makes for a better process, better policy. So thank you, Chair, for reaching out early on this.
By 2 a.m.
Yeah, we all know.
Yeah.
Setting expectations, I think you've heard that, I think it's important to set modest expectations. We're not expecting that every renter that we have, especially low income folks, are gonna run out and get these right away. That said, we do not have an objection for getting a foot in this and getting this moving and learning. We also have community solar, so we have other options for folks that want to support renewable energy that don't have an appropriate site or rooftop or rent. And so this could be one of many options that folks can explore and see if it makes sense for them. But when I shopped it around to my team, they were a lot of like, you think people really do this? And I said, I don't know, we'll see, right? Price points matter and things like that. A few comments, some things that are a little different than what you heard, so put some new things on the table. Our comments are driven by the safety concerns and the cost concerns. We would never want a member who chooses to do this to incur, it causes cost to other members, right? So that's the spirit of which these comments are given. I'm not gonna really touch on the safety things too much. There's provisions in here that we support, especially about the outage and not having the back bead. That's critical. And kind of inform some of the other comments. The exemption threshold was driving a lot of our concerns about safety and transformers blowing up and, you know, the worst case scenarios, I think, get remedied by there being a clear threshold. The definition, I do think, needs some work because it's not clear to me on a simple reading, and I'm not a lawyer, that the device cannot exceed the 1,200 watts, but what about the system? You know, somebody puts 10 of these, I doubt it will happen, but if they did also, then we would have some concerns about safety and backbeating and, you know, impact. So we can gladly work with you on the definition. It gets complicated whether you, the terms like account or service location, there's a lot of things there. So we gotta get it just right because an account can have multiple households, like a landlord has an account, but there could be a lot of people under that account. Or a customer can have multiple accounts, so you're a customer, but you have different locations, so let's work on that with Ellen or whoever to, you know, make sure we're very clear that we're getting it right, so that will be very important. The notice provisions, I will share, I think part of the reason it's in there is because I might have brought that up when I spoke to you early, and now that we dug in and we understand there's the threshold limit and we understand, you know, that there's the cutoff. During outages, things like that, I think it's less important for us to get notified. So we would be comfortable with taking that section out because all those other provisions are now in there. When we first were looking at this, we said, we need to know for safety and load management and all that, but I think at this point, especially how it's drafted, it's not enforceable. I understood from the PUC testimony, they don't really want to be doing this. It would be incomplete information. I don't know what the enforcement mechanism would be. Would we stop delivering power to people who don't report? You know, I don't think it's really workable how it's written, and I'm not sure the value it adds. So we would be comfortable with taking that provision out. Something to maybe add though. We're kind of all trying to figure out how this would play out in this emerging new interesting world, and maybe a report back at some point would be indicated. We a year from now or 2 years from now, if we have transformers that blew up, you know, or something, that would be really important to know whether we got it right. So maybe if the PUC or DPS would be willing to survey us, survey the fire, the first responders, you know, have any issues emerged, is this something we're worried about, and do like a check back, I think might make sense. That's just, one other provision that concerned us, that I might raise. The part about the DUs cannot charge people for any costs around this, I think generally that's fine. But if someone did blow up a transformer. We don't know what they're doing, they put a whole bunch of these in, there's a problem. We would not want to see other members having to pay for that cost. We would want that entity to, what we do now, we put something on the system, you didn't let us know about it. There's a large cost because of that. We do go back to the member and we say you are responsible and it costs this much and you should pay this. And of course, it doesn't always go smoothly, but I would hate that this would not let us do that if somebody did something irresponsible and didn't, you know. So we can offer some language if you're interested with making an exception, you know, that will not cause costs unless there was an incident or something that was responsibility from the member to the system. So maybe that's something, unless damage to the systems or upgrades needed, like that, because of their choices. Final, just closing comment to emphasize. the consumer protection piece is big. We get so many members call us with complaints, nothing to do with us. Somebody sized the system inappropriately, they got sold something, it was not appropriate. And we feel terrible because it's nothing we can do anything about, and I'm not saying all the folks are bad, there's sometimes some bad actors. Not, selling people things they don't need or isn't appropriate. And I don't know what you might be able to do for that. I see internet ads pop up on my Facebook feeds. Did you see your electric rates? They're this, and buy this instead, and I know it's not factually correct, and if I was a vulnerable, maybe low-income person, an older person, I might think this is just gonna save me so much money, and it doesn't, and there's nothing, we're always after the fact. We tell people to do their research, but. So if there's ways you can beef that up in terms of just supporting the market, because the ones that are good actors, they get a bad reputation. It's just important for making this work the way you're intending it, so. I think that was the end of my comments. Any questions?
Super. Yes.
Just question, the check back report, if we're taking out the section because you all agree that you don't wanna know. I don't know how we would do a check back report, cause there would be no data, it would just be a hearsay report. Like, oh, I heard about this thing that happened somewhere that might be related to these things.
It could be DPS or PC surveying the DUs. Are you having any issues on your systems? Surveying the fire, response,
Yeah.
saying, are you having any issues? Just
But how would they know that they're related to these things? I don't think they would know that they're related to.
we might know.
Just like you wouldn't know that things are related to a new refrigerator. I mean, if these really are that kind of low level, like power generators, they're the equivalent of a.
If they stay within the limits.
If they stay within the
Correct.
limits, I don't know that you would know unless we're asking people to report. And it sounds like you don't want us to have people to report. And so I'm really hesitant to ask for a report from a state agency that's either based on hearsay or requires them to do so much digging to be able to figure it out.
And I'm not suggesting I'm suggesting a survey of the DUs. Are you having any issues? Are you getting complaints? Just very simple, because you all want it to be good. You might want to adjust things if things aren't going well. Again, if you don't agree with that, I understand.
Yeah,
but
no,
I
I'm just
feel
trying to
like
see how it
feedback
works,
loop-
and it does seem like the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's office, I mean, often we do get reports on what are they getting complaints about.
That's great.
And, we could, if they get a lot of complaints about these things, then we might be like, oh, we gotta deal with that. Just like when we know that they're getting a lot of complaints about contractors, or they're getting a lot of complaints about whatever, we are like, oh, we should maybe.
And if we're having issues, we'll bring them forward. It's just, sometimes it's nice to just, how's it going, check back.
Yeah.
Not meant to be a big workload for them or us, it's just, you get feedback, you remember to get feedback.
Yeah.
But if you. We'll let you know if we're having
Sure.
issues for sure.
Well, right, like, I mean, in the situation of, we had this apartment building and everyone got one and.
Right, and then, again, I don't expect it to be a big thing. I think it's good practice, but it's okay if it goes different ways.
Sure. Great, any other questions?
Thank you.
Super, thank you. Okay, and do we have, Amber, yes, hello, hi. Welcome.
Thank you. Amber Widmer from Burlington Electric Department. Thank you for the opportunity for us to come in today. We're excited to support the bill. Burlington Electric has a long history of being pro solar. We have over 10 megawatts of solar installed in our territory. We were recognized by Environment America as a shining city for being a leader in solar adoption, so we're excited for this technology to provide more access to renters and people who don't have the ability to install net metering systems. We echo much of the testimony that you've heard from the other utilities and the department and commission. We are okay with deleting the notification or something to make it clean. In terms of the tweaking the definition for limiting the 1.2 kilowatt. I think it would be a clean solution to limit it to a total 1.2 export ability perhaps per dwelling unit. Might get to the, the customer versus the landlord situation. Let's see, in terms of,
Can you just repeat that? Sure, export for it.
rather than have it as a 1.2 kilowatt per system, make it a total of 1.2 kilowatt per dwelling unit.
Okay.
So that if people do want to aggregate, that would limit that, so they can have, and like 10 systems.
Yeah.
Agree with the suggestions on the UL listing. And yeah, provided that the questions that have been raised are addressed, we are happy to support them.
Super. All right, any questions?
Just want to make sure we're getting clear about like apartment buildings, because you mentioned apartment buildings. Are we thinking about the limit per meter? Or would it matter if you had one, if there's one, I guess they're all set, apartments then be separate meters, right?
Not all of
Not
them.
all, okay,
So yeah, that's why we
so
figured out the dwelling unit
if
scenario.
they're not, and on one, multiple apartments on 1 meter, is that? They all do it, but they're 1,200, is that gonna be a problem for all going through that 1 meter, or is it? Or is that not an issue?
I think we're not concerned about the scale of adoption at this point, raising an issue. But, that is a question that might be worth revisiting in the future.
Okay, so we should.
It does get into the
Yeah.
question of what is a dwelling unit.
Yeah,
Scott and I talk about all the time.
I think in general, that they're designed to not be exporting, so we're not especially concerned about.
Okay.
My question there, I think it's interesting to have it be per dwelling unit, which works if it were talking about residences, but I could certainly picture small businesses wanting to do this as well, and so then it's,
Yeah, that's
so it seems like we have to
right, there's,
do both, something like per meter or per dwelling unit, and I'm not sure how to frame that exactly, but, to acknowledge that it's, may not just be homeowners or renters.
that's this one.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Before we are gonna take a break because we're running ahead. But just to check in with the committee about things that you've heard so far today, what, how is either your thinking changed or things that you want to see amended? What's jumping out to you?
Well, I'm still supportive of it, yeah. I'd have to go back and reread the bills for some of the details relative to some of what we heard this morning. I'm tending to think though that I don't think it's a good idea for these people to have to search the utilities that they're operating unless somebody comes back after they've had some more time to think about it and says, yeah, well, there is something.
Or, I'm generally supportive of taking everything into consideration. I heard from everybody. The concern I've got is that, Vermont should be able, if we're gonna save energy, we should be able to claim that somehow. If it doesn't go back through net metering, you have no way of collecting that data. Number two is that, I would be concerned about some guy like me wiring it himself and going feeding back on the system. Be kind of like our committee assistant, having somebody with a program open, feeding back on screwing up everything. If you don't know where the problem is, how are you gonna know how to identify those? It could affect the whole grid in that area.
But to my understanding, people have been using the term wiring, but this is really just a grounded plug that goes into an outlet. Okay, it's not.
No, I think if
Money in prior and.
like
Yeah,
if you were
right.
buying all the pieces separately and putting it together, that would not have the UL listing. And so it would not, according to this bill, be a portable solar device.
So the components are available on the
Yes,
market to
Yeah.
do that right now.
yes,
So if you've got, the other thing is if you have an apartment, obviously it's only certain places that your apartment would be able to take advantage of the sun. And a lot of apartments have multiple units that maybe on one meter
I'm certain.
circuit, so I'm just concerned about landlord, the landlords. Whether they want something like this, on their system, that's all.
Some apartments, every apartment's on 1 meter,
Yeah,
others there.
right, and they just charge them so much a month.
Yeah.
For the electric.
go ahead.
I think everything we heard today is quote unquote fixable in the bill. I mean, I agree, and I took lots of notes on the bill itself. So I think we can address all the concerns in some way or another. And what I heard is that these units are so small that you're not gonna notice really, like one guy wiring it some weird way and probably it's not gonna take it down. If that's, then I would be. We got bigger problems if that's the case. So I think that that there are enough safety sort of mechanisms that would be.
Well, if they could blow up the transformer.
I
Yeah,
don't think that we can, these are not that big, these are tiny little things and.
I heard blowing up the transformer would be an issue.
My
Yeah,
bigger concern, I mean, transformers can be replaced, my bigger concern is that you get too much on one wire in one unit and you get a fire.
Mhm.
That's my bigger concern when blowing up the transformer.
Well, and that is,
Yeah.
did you get to read that, the Clean Energy States Alliance paper, because it has some great.
I don't know.
It addresses that, and
Yeah.
well, they called it out, and
Yeah. And I just only
really well.
you know, they've been using
on the
these
website.
in Europe for a while and have. And there are way more renters in Europe, they're like, that's the. They're a renter
I'll have to read that.
economy. So I think that,
Transformers can be replaced.
yeah,
Well, and I said it only to also just say, to like affirm that as a concern, but that is very much on the radar of the UL
Okay.
folks, so, it's like actually from a physics perspective, it's really like, oh my gosh, Kirchhoff's laws, this is like, I'm like, share it with my physics teaching friends, but anyway, sorry.
Say most of the time, it's make the meter go solar. That's,
Right,
yeah,
so,
I'm
I also
feeling,
think,
yep,
by the way, there's 1 meter with 6 apartments. I wouldn't do this, because I've been doing it for everybody, you know.
Right.
That's
Like
true,
it-
that's true.
you do it for
Good.
But nobody's gonna, people aren't gonna do that. You guys know that's their.
That's a good point, like if you had an apartment building. And you're out putting like a little bit, cause your refrigerator isn't,
Yeah.
doesn't happen to be running at that moment, like somebody else's probably is.
Yeah.
And,
You're helping out the greater good.
yeah, it's true. Since you're here.
Yes,
you
I
would, yes,
was,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, there was one other thing I meant to mention, in your discussion on metering reminded me, Candace Morgan, Green Mountain Power. The questions that you were asking of Mr. Nolan at the beginning about how it would work for non-smart meters is true, except for there are some, non-smart meters that we still have out there. That if you were to plug one of these, devices in, and it would be, generating a little bit more than what you are using at any point in time, and I understand there might be some guardrails around anything being pushed back to the grid. But if there were a situation where that was happening, it would actually show up as more load, just because they're very outdated devices, and folks have opted out to continue to use those versus a smart meter. And to make sure that customers are getting billed accurately and to allow them to see a little bit more on, when they're using. A discussion on the type of metering might be worth it, just to confirm that folks have a smart meter so that they are being billed as accurately as possible if they have one of these devices. I don't want to open up a whole other conversation before you go on break, but I just wanted to put that out there for consideration. And I know utilities are at various stages of deployment, so it could be a non-smart meter as long as it's the right one, or a smart meter, requirement as well, so just wanted to flag that, I mean,
Yeah. Okay. Let's have some further conversation.
for sure, we can talk more about it, I can
Yeah,
get you a little bit more information, was just checking in with our metering team about it yesterday. It's not a huge issue, but it's just, it's a consideration that I just wanna make sure.
Just make sure I understand, the issue with, the potential issue is that the customer wouldn't get the reduction.
Correct.
Bill that they. Okay.
It might actually
Same-
look,
it's not
It might
a-
look- It
Same
look like warm.
issue, okay, okay.
it could be a detriment.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right, no worries, thank you, I appreciate that on the radar.
Yeah.
So what I think we should do is go right into, because we have Senator Chittenden with us. And so we have a new bill to talk about, and here's what I'm thinking, Jude, tell me if you think. Because I assume Ellen's not gonna be here for a little bit.
I emailed her to tell her we're ahead, but.
Oh, okay, so what we could do is have Senator Chittenden introduce us, and then we'll take a quick break. And there we go. Photos.
I can be really quick, need like 5
Oh,
minutes.
yeah, nice, yeah, super. Okay, so a new bill, S 138, and go ahead, take it away.
Great, so I thought I would just say my history, my experiences with CPACE that I've been familiar with, or property assessed clean energy financing. For the last 10 years, I've actually teach a course at the University of Vermont Green 19 virtualization, and this was always a discussion in a small case study that we discussed. I also served on the staff of Burlington City Council, where we were familiar with what Vermont does allow, which is residential property assessed clean energy financing. So I had familiarity with this. The reason why I introduced this bill in mid-session last year was in our discussions on economic development. We were talking about both how to incentivize addressing atrophied housing as well as businesses in your strip malls or small farms. PACE is a tool that could be in the toolkit to help incentivize and align long-term benefits with short-term interests. So let me just give you my spiel on why I think this is something worth enabling. I also understand there's an amendment. I fully support it on whatever it makes to make sense. A couple of lobbyists have reached out saying other states have done this before and they offered some advice. I just wanted to get the conversation going, and since it's clean energy, it really fell into this committee. So I introduced the bill to literally toss it over the fence and have all you nice people consider it. So thank you for doing so. This is where I think it could be beneficial. Imagine you're a strip mall. So you own a strip mall like the Blue Mall or a small farm or Stone Mountain Resort. And you're not necessarily certain that you're going to keep that property as a commercial developer or manager in your portfolio. So you own this asset and you're managing it, and there's economic activity happening there. And you're thinking about investing in a clean energy improvement like solar panel or solar panel carports. So this article I just sent you is about a Pittsburgh facility. This is happening in Pennsylvania, is using CPACE in order to align long-term benefits with short-term interests to make financing things like carport solar panels make sense for whoever owns that parcel. What PACE would effectively do, and I'm thinking a lot of you already know this, is would just allow debt instruments to not be carried by individuals, but instead be assessed to the property assessed clean energy. So if you are a strip mall owner or the Stone Mountain Resort or a small farm, and you're thinking about how do I really want to spend $50,000 or $300,000 on extra cantilever infrastructure to have solar panels high enough that I can park and plow underneath them to shield my cars from both the rain, the snow, as well as the sun in the summer. That's really expensive, and I'm not sure I could recoup that cost both resale. If I were to sell this 2 or 3 years from now, I'm not sure the selling price is going to be able to recapture that investment. But there is actual economic benefit from the solar panels that can subsidize your electricity and also generate revenues going forward. You can assign the debt to the property rather than to you individually, so that when you sell the parcel, whoever else owns or maintains it continues to pay through their property taxes. Now, who owns that debt can be the municipality, and I know VLCT might have concerns with that, but there is a role for them. Also, other states allow for third parties. And that does a big consideration that you want to think about is 2 things I'd highlight is
You want to think about the subordination of the debt, whether or not it would have primacy over the mortgage holders, or if it would be junior to that. I'm sure that the Bankers Association will have an opinion on that. I don't have a strong opinion. I just see this as a tool that could be useful in the toolkit to get cleaner energy infrastructure, while also spurring economic redevelopment in a variety of different cases. The other thing that I saw that I didn't see in your amendment that might be worthwhile, other states have feasibility assessments. So I think this would be a natural fit for an organization like VITA. They already do a fair amount of this, but they want to look at what the clean energy investment would actually generate over the lifespan to ensure that the repayment, the payoff would actually pay for the infrastructure so that the future owners would either be held harmless through any price modeling, or there would be a net benefit to finance both the project costs as well as otherwise. So the feasibility assessment might be worth considering. Regardless, I just thank you for taking time on this, and it just came up in conference committee last year, and we said, let's introduce the bill and see if y'all want to talk about it.
Yes,
Just to jump in, I'm sorry, it's a little bit, I guess a part about deciding for the debt rather, I mean, to the property rather than the person. You were then talking about the municipality, means that, how would the municipality end up with somebody's debt?
So the bill is paid through your property taxes generally. So the local municipality in some states, okay, when they send a property bill, they would also collect over 20 years or whatever the financing of this is the repayment for that amount. So the municipality could hold the debt, or you can also have third parties that would just either junior subordination or primary subordination, meaning they get in front of the mortgage holder. So whether or not our local town would want to have that as part of their property tax management, or if they would want this to be entirely managed by a third party, that would be open discussion. But it would be owned by whoever owns the parcel, if that makes sense, which is the key benefit. So I hope I can clearly communicate that. If you're Stone Mountain Resort and you're thinking about putting carports in, but the owners and the board members aren't sure that they're really going to keep it in a portfolio past 5 years for whatever reasons, it might be a harder motivation for them to invest in it. But if they can finance that long-term benefit of 20+ years of generating clean energy and carry or hand that off to whoever owns it in the future, that's where it plays a role and possibly aligning incentives, short-term interest to long-term benefits.
go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. Do you know how, does this impact property taxes or property valuation at all?
So property valuation, I wouldn't expect so. This is an improvement on the property. So if the assessor deems that as additionally valuable, certainly, but it would just be a way to finance an improvement on a property. Whether or not you want to scope it to also include other improvements like weatherization, it's because there's a payback for that as well. All of those things would affect property value, which when you invest and develop a property, then your overall value should go up, so should the grand list. As the property, and then property taxes, the other part of that question would also.
This is not like a tip that borrows from,
No,
okay,
no, it's not.
okay.
So this debt would be paid off and owned by somebody. It would be obligated to whoever owns the parcel and not necessarily who took out the debt. The property assessed.
So my understanding is that there are some other states that include the possibility of resiliency as one of the uses for this. How do you feel about that possibility?
Certainly, I think the key thing is payoff,
Yeah.
whether or not there's a real payoff for this, but resiliency can be proved out through lower insurance. And also just greater confidence and resistance against weather elements. I can see the argument for that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I talked too fast, but I figured you want your break.
Fair enough. I do think, I mean, we have one senator out, so I think we are gonna take just a quick 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, sound is out.
Okay, this is Senate National Resources and Energy, and we're coming back from a break. And so just a little context for this. So as I said, we're gonna walk through the bill as introduced. And then so in preparation for today, I had some conversations with people who are in the industry and DFR, et cetera. Anyway, so immediately after we go through the bill as introduced, we're gonna go through a new draft, and want to acknowledge that the new draft is not the end and will continue to evolve it. There are questions that I have about it as well, so as far as, you know, a polished product, we're still, like, I think we're still in progress. And also, I mean, that's true for all bills, to be fair, but there's one other thing I wanted to say about this. Oh, right, so I also want to acknowledge that our role in this is to think about the clean energy and the resilience, potentially resiliency aspects of this bill. I want to acknowledge that we are, at least in this room, not steeped in financial regulation understanding, and anticipating that this bill would go to finance. And so the details of how the financing aspects of it work, I'm anticipating would be vetted more thoroughly by the finance committee, kind of like with the SALT bill. On the liability protections, we had the judiciary committee review that, as that was their expertise. We want to make sure that we are getting the renewable energy and potential resiliency aspects of this correct. So having said that, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm here on S-138 as introduced. I will walk you through the language of the bill. The changes in the bill introduced are very minimal. And I can give you a basic explanation of how the financing works. I cannot answer questions specific to how the financing works. This law was levied, and has not really been tweaked since then, so I've never worked on it before. But we're talking about property assessed clean energy projects. This is a type of system that has been adopted by most other states in the country, so it does exist for both residential projects and commercial projects. And this bill, as introduced, would be extending the property assessed clean energy districts from just residential projects, which is what Vermont currently has now, to also include commercial and industrial projects as well. So section 1 is amending 24 VSA chapter 87, subchapter 2, property assessed clean energy, also called PACE. So in this subchapter, district means a property assessed clean energy district. The legislative body of a town, city, or incorporated village may submit to the voters of the municipality the question of whether to designate the municipality as a property assessed clean energy district. In a district, only those properties, onto page 2, property owners who have entered into written agreements with the municipality would be subject to special assessment as set forth in 3255. So the town has to hold a vote to decide to become a property assessed clean energy district for the whole town. And once that happens, property owners can then enter into an agreement with the municipality itself to fund the financing for energy projects. Upon a vote of a majority of the qualified voters of the municipality, voting at an annual or special meeting duly warned for the purpose, the municipality may incur indebtedness for or otherwise finance projects related to renewable energy as defined in 30 VSA 8002-17, which is the definition section of the renewable energy project programs in Title 30. Or to eligible projects relating to energy efficiency as defined in 3276 of this title. Those projects, the 3276 directs Efficiency Vermont and the other efficiency utilities to produce a list of qualified energy efficiency projects to be published so that people know what they are. So it does task the efficiency utilities to make that list. Undertaken by owners of dwellings as defined in section 103B of the Federal Truth in Lending Act. Or by owners of commercial or industrial buildings within the boundaries of the city, town, or incorporated village. So under the law as it has existed, this has only been open to owners of residential dwellings. This would be adding commercial and industrial buildings as well. And the definition I've added here is any building other than a residential dwelling. You can provide, it was unclear to me what exactly the sponsor wanted for that definition, so if you can tailor that if you would like to. The next section is 3262. And so this is the section on the agreements, and it's adding once again commercial and industrial. So upon an affirmative vote made pursuant to the section I just read you, and the performance of an energy savings analysis pursuant to subsection B of this section, an owner of a dwelling as defined in the Truth in Lending Act, or an owner of a commercial or industrial building within the boundaries of the district may enter into a written agreement with the municipality that shall constitute the owner's consent to be subject to a special assessment set forth in 3255. I'm on to page 3. Entry into an agreement may occur only after January 1, 2012. A participating municipality shall follow underwriting criteria established by the Department of Financial Regulation and shall establish other qualifying criteria to provide an adequate level of assurance that property owners will have the ability to meet assessment payment obligations. A participating municipality shall refuse to enter into an agreement with a property owner who fails to meet the underwriting or other qualifying criteria. These are only 2 sections of this subchapter. There are a number of other provisions in this subchapter related to how this financing option works. And then this bill was introduced last year. The effective date is July 1, 2025, but so if you were ready, you would need to update that.
Great. So we're gonna roll right into a new draft, but yes, questions?
Just question about. Entered into agreement happened during the well. Would that come?
When the statute was originally enacted, the program was allowed to start until after January 1, 2012.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so that was exclusively for residential property owners at the time. This bill would be expanding it to commercial property owners as well.
Yeah, so I requested this as an update based on some feedback that I got, and we'll hear more about, so go ahead.
Sure, so what this draft, there was a request. So when I initially drafted this section, I just incorporated commercial and industrial properties into the existing statute. The request was to create statutes specific to commercial projects because there will be some proposed differences that would apply to commercial projects that are going to be different from residential. And so I don't know if I have accomplished the goal quite, but this is a proposal. So what I have done just before I walk through it is I have added 2 new sections specific to commercial and then reference some of the other existing statutes to residential. Because the subchapter 2 has a number of other sections. I wasn't sure if I should duplicate all of them. So,
That's a good question.
yeah, so this is a sort of hybrid. There's so anyways, happy to take questions on that. If this meets your intent. So section 1 is adding a new subchapter 3, specific to commercial property assessed clean energy. And so this first section, 3275, is very close to the same process I just read through for the bill is introduced, but it's specific to commercial. So in this subchapter, district means a property assessed clean energy district. The legislative body of a town, city, or incorporated village may submit to the voters of the municipality the question of whether to designate the municipality as a property assessed clean energy district. In a district, only those property owners who have entered into a written agreement with the municipality under 3276 would be subject to special assessment as set forth in 3255. Upon a vote of approval by the majority of the qualified voters of the municipality, voting at an annual or special meeting duly warned for that purpose, the municipality may incur indebtedness or otherwise finance, onto page 2. Projects related to renewable energy as defined in 30 VSA 8017. Or to eligible projects related to energy efficiency as defined in 3276. Undertaken by owners of commercial or industrial buildings within the boundary of the town, city, or incorporated village. So, that is all the same language that is in the underlying statute for residential, with the exception of commercial and industrial. And then again, my proposed definition for commercial or industrial, at any building other than a residential dwelling. So on page 2, line 7, 3276 written agreements, consent of property owners, energy savings analysis. Upon an affirmative vote made pursuant to 3275 and the performance of an energy savings analysis pursuant to subsection B of the section, an owner of a commercial or industrial building within the boundaries of a district may enter into a written agreement with the municipality that shall constitute the owner's consent to be subject to special assessment, as set forth in 3255. Entry into such an agreement may occur only after January 1, 2027. A participating municipality shall follow underwriting criteria established by the Department of Financial Regulation, and shall establish other qualifying criteria to provide an adequate level of assurance that property owners will have the ability to meet assessed payment obligations. A participating municipality shall refuse to enter into a written agreement with a property owner who fails to meet the underwriting and qualifying agreements. So this is identical to the other statute, with the exception of the date of 2027, which would be when this program would start. So on page 3, this is where the first real deviation from the underlying statute is. So subsection B is largely what is in the existing chapter for residential case, but the sub-criteria underneath it are what it has been proposed. So prior to entering into a written agreement, a property owner shall have analyses performed to quantify the project costs and energy savings and estimated carbon impacts of the proposed energy improvements, including an annual cash flow analysis, as well as the following analyses. Where energy or water usage improvements are proposed, an energy analysis by a licensed engineering firm or engineer or other qualified professional listed in the program guidebook, stating that the proposed qualified improvements will result in more efficient use or conservation of water or energy or water, the reduction of greenhouse gases, or the addition of renewable sources of energy or water. Where renewable energy is proposed, an engineering study showing that the improvements are feasible. Where resilience improvements are proposed, certification by a licensed professional engineer stating that the qualified improvements will result in improved resilience. Or for new construction, certification by a licensed professional engineer or engineering firm stating that the proposed qualified improvements will enable the project to exceed the energy efficiency or water efficiency or renewable energy or water usage or resilience requirements of the current building code. So these are not currently required under the residential statute. They're more specific and detailed than what is required already. At the bottom of page 3 onto page 4. A written agreement shall provide that the length of time allowed for the property owner to repay the assessment shall not exceed the life expectancy of the project. In instances where multiple projects have been installed, the length of time shall not exceed the average lifetime of all projects weighted by cost. Lifetimes of projects shall be determined by the entities appointed as energy efficiency utilities or another qualified technical entity designated by the participating municipality. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, at the time of a transfer of property ownership, including foreclosure, The past due balances of any special assessment under this chapter shall be due for payment, but future payments shall continue as a lien on the property. In the event of a foreclosure action, past due balances described in subdivision A of this subdivision shall include all payments on an assessment under this subchapter that are due and unpaid as of the date that the action is filed. And all payments on the assessment that become due after the date and that accrue up to and including the date title to the property is transferred to the mortgage holder, the lien holder, or a third party in the foreclosure action. A person or entity acquiring title to the property in the foreclosure action shall be responsible for payments on the assessment that become due after the date of such acquisition. On to page 5. A participating municipality shall disclose to the participating property owners each of the following. The risks associated with participating in the program, including risks related to failure of participating property owner to make payments and the risk of foreclosure. And provisions of subsection H of the section that pertain to prepayment of the assessment. A written agreement or notice of an agreement and the analysis performed under subsection B of this section shall be filed with the clerk of the applicable municipality for recording in the land records of the municipality and shall be disclosed to potential buyers prior to transfer of property ownership. Personal financial information provided to a municipality by a participating property owner or potential participating property owner shall not be subject to disclosure as set forth in 1 VSA 317C7, which is the Public Records Act. If a notice of agreement is filed instead of a full written agreement, the notice shall attach the analysis performed pursuant to subsection B and shall include at least each of the following: the name of the property owner as grantor, the name of the municipality as grantee, the date of the agreement, onto page 6. A legal description of the property against which the assessment is made pursuant to this agreement, the amount of the assessment and period during which the assessment will be made on the property. A statement that the assessment will remain a lien on the property until paid in full or released. And the location at which the original or true legible copy of the agreement may be examined. The property owner shall provide to the holders of any existing mortgages on the property notice of intent to enter into the written agreement. The combined amount of the assessment plus any outstanding mortgage obligations for the property shall not exceed 90% of the assessed value of the property. With respect to an agreement under this section, the assessment to be repaid under the agreement, when calculated as if they were the repayment of a loan, shall not violate 9 VSA 41A, 43, 44, and 46 through 50. Those are statutes related to interest and loans. And the maximum length of time for the owner to repay the assessment shall not exceed 30 years. Subsection H, down at the bottom of page 6, there should be no penalty or premium for prepayment of the outstanding balance of an assessment under this chapter if the balance is prepaid in full. On to page 7. Property may be eligible for financing if otherwise qualified improvements were completed and operational not more than 36 months prior to submission of the application to the program. Waivers to the 36-month requirement may be granted in the sole discretion of the program administrator. Section 3277 rulemaking. The Commissioner of Financial Regulation, in consultation with the Secretary of Natural Resources, may adopt rules to implement this subchapter related to commercial property assessed clean energy projects. I think you should hear more about this. I do think that DFR has issued underwriting criteria. I don't know if they have done that via rulemaking, and I'm not sure that ANR would have much to add. You know, but so perhaps maybe DPS. I don't know. So then section 2 amends one of the existing pay statutes, cost of operation of the district.
The owners of real property who have entered into written agreements with the municipality under section 3262, which is the residential case, or 3276, which is the new commercial case, shall be obligated to cover the costs of operating the district. A municipality may use other available funds to operate the district. Section 3, rights of property owners. A property owner who has entered into a written agreement with the municipality under 3262, which is residential, or 3276, or commercial, may enter into a private agreement for the installation or construction of a project relating to, on page 8, renewable energy as defined, or relating to energy efficiency as defined. On page 8, section 4, liability of municipality. A municipality that has incurred indebtedness for or otherwise finances project under this subchapter or subchapter 3, the commercial subchapter, shall not be liable for the failure of performance of the project. A municipality that incurs indebtedness for bonding under this subchapter or subchapter 3 shall pledge the full faith and credit of the municipality. Section 5, 3266 intermunicipal agreements. 2 or more municipalities by resolution of their respective legislative bodies or boards may establish and enter into agreements for incurring indebtedness or otherwise financing projects under this subchapter or subchapter 3. Section 6, 3267, eligible energy efficiency projects. Those entities appointed as efficiency utilities under 30 VSA 209, which would include Efficiency Vermont, BED, and Vermont Gas. Onto page 9, shall develop a list of eligible energy efficiency projects and shall make the list available to the public on or before July 1 of each year. And shall provide information concerning implementation of this subchapter and subchapter 3 to each municipality within the area in which the entity delivers efficiency services that request such information, and shall contact each such municipality that votes to establish a district to offer this information. Section 7, release of lien. A municipality shall release a participating property owner of the lien on the property against which the assessment under this subchapter, or subchapter 3, is made upon full payment of the value of the assessment. Notice of a release of a lien for an assessment under this subchapter, or subchapter 3, shall file with the clerk of the applicable municipality for recording in the land records of that municipality. Section 8, collection of assessments, liens. Special assessments under this chapter shall constitute a lien on the property against which the assessment is made in the same manner and to the same extent as taxes assessed on the grand list of a municipality, and shall, on to page 10, procedures and all procedures and remedies for the collection of taxes shall apply to special assessments. Notwithstanding subsection A of this section, a lien for an assessment under subchapter 2 of this section, subchapter 2 of this chapter, shall be subordinate to all other liens on the property in existence at the time the lien for the assessment is filed on the land records. Shall be subordinate to a first mortgage on the property reported after such filing, and shall be superior to all other lien to any other lien on the property reported after such filing. In no way shall this subsection affect the status or priority of any municipal lien other than a lien for an assessment under subchapter 2 of this chapter. A lien for an assessment under subchapter 3 of this chapter shall not be subordinate to all other liens on the property in existence at the time the lien for the assessment is filed with the land record. So this is creating a distinction between the residential projects and the commercial projects. For residential projects, aside from the first mortgage on the property, it takes priority over any other liens on the property or when there's payment to be made. This is creating, though, that for commercial projects, it is not subordinate to all other liens on the property. So this is this distinction about who gets paid first. And this, you should hear more about that from someone other than me.
I was gonna say, this is a topic of discussion.
Section 9 is of exceptions
to, and this is in 9 ESA, section 46. I cannot fully explain this language, but I will read it through for you. Section 43 of this title, so this is Title 9, we're talking about liens, loans and interest relating to deposit requirements, and section 45 relating to prepayment penalties. Shall not apply to the parties, and the parties may contract for a rate of interest in excess of the rate provided in section 41A of this title. In the case of, and it's adding on page 11, it's adding obligations incurred for commercial property assessed clean energy projects under 24 VSA 87 subchapter 3. And it shall take effect on July 1, 2026. So this is a program where funding for energy projects can be made through voluntary agreements between a property owner and the municipality where they are located. The town acts as payment collector and remitter. And financial instruments are not my specialty.
So this is that you were signed.
It's got clean energy in the title.
But it's really, it's
It's a financing mechanism,
Yeah.
So. One question, so this, as I understand it, it does not necessarily allow third parties to. Hold the indebtedness. Is that fair?
I believe so, but
That's what
there are people in the state who have a lot of familiarity with the existing program that can speak to you about that.
Well, anyway, I'm putting it out there as like, this is something that Senator Chittenden raised that is possible in other states, and so maybe something that we want to allow for as well. So it's not just in this.
Party against the indebtedness, it's the willingness,
Effectively a pass through, like that's how I understand it, but we should take more testimony on it, so. Okay,
And I
Yes.
guess I would just add, there were. In the two brand new sections, there are a couple of distinctions between the existing language. Perhaps the next witness is gonna speak about.
sure.
Uh.
You mean the difference between the first draft and the
Resident-
second draft?
Well, the
Oh,
existing program versus what you're proposing in this new program. So
Yeah.
there are entirely new statutes in in 3275 and 3276, because there were. The interest is to have it be distinct from the residential program, and you should hear more about those
Mhm.
distinctions.
and why this needs some additional provisions.
Yeah.
And why it's distinct. Yeah, I think that's fair, and this is something that our next witness and I have talked, so, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so with that, Ms. Samai, welcome.
Thank
You-
you. Thank you.
Great, and also, have I said your name right?
Sami, correct. Very close. Very
Great.
good. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to listen in and be part of this discussion.
Great, if you can hold on 1 second, yep, great, thank you, you read my mind, Jude, thank you. Okay, maybe, before we get started, if we could do just a quick round of introductions, so that you know who you're speaking to.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
Good morning, I'm Senator Terry Williams from Rutland District.
And wants for the Washington District,
Senator Bongartz from the Bennington District.
Senator Scott Beck from Caledonia District.
great, and if you could, go ahead and introduce yourself and then, take it away with what, talking about commercial pace and the draft.
Great. Thank you all. I welcome the opportunity and appreciate, that you're taking up this very important topic. My name is Amanda Sami. I work for a company called Castle Green Finance. We provide CPACE financing as a third-party lender into states across the US that have approved CPACE at the state level and then at the local municipality level like you're considering today. So I have a long history in CPACE. I've been involved on the origination side, but also previously as an investor in the asset class for pensions and insurance companies. So I have a history in CPACE that dates back to when the Vermont statute sort of was enacted in 2011 and contemplated at that time, I think, a heavy consideration as it's written for residential, which has shifted over the years to now be a focus in the market primarily for commercial properties, which is what this amendment is specifically addressing. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I've spoken in a number of states as it's, you know, as a testifying in support of CPACE. So I understand the questions as they come up, and I'm happy to, you know, assist in anyone's understanding. But the way we view PACE, which is now sort of active in about 37 states across the US and over 10 billion, I believe, in commercial originations, has been performed. And it's more recently in the last, you know, sort of 7 years and primarily earlier years focused on residential. But the focus, as I said, you know, from a legislative perspective and from a financing perspective, has moved away from the consumer more into the commercial space. So the key points that are raised, and I appreciate all the attention that's been given in the work that has sort of been put into date to what we call modernize the statute, but it really is meant to offer a voluntary financing program. And that, I think the keywords are sort of voluntary and consenting. The statute allows local municipalities that wish to offer this financing the opportunity to do so. And it offers property owners who would like to take advantage of the financing a similar opportunity to do so. It's all voluntary. There is some language in the statute currently that allows for the municipality to offer the financing, and certain municipalities retain that and others only do third-party financing where no money of the local municipality pledge or faith of the balance sheet or the credit of that municipality is pledged towards the repayment of the assessment. So what it does really is allows property owners to access capital through private lenders that is secured in the property records of the building in which they're building or otherwise improving with the sort of improvements that are noted herein. Energy efficiency, renewable resiliency is important. We can talk separately about that. And certainly in various states, we're seeing more states that have earlier statutes now adding resiliency because of the many instances that they can be beneficial there. So the property owner would like to borrow some percentage of the capital that they need, or potentially all the capital they need if they're replacing their air conditioning systems or putting in LED lighting or other, you know, energy efficiency improvements. And they do that through this program. The municipality's participation is through allowing that to be levied as a special assessment in the land records. You've heard things here like consent and you know, subordination, and really because of the voluntary nature of the program, what other states have done and what this amendment sort of seeks to clarify is that because this is a voluntary program, what your statute amendment does not contemplate, but we would recommend, is that there's written consent of the lenders, of the mortgage lenders, of the lien holders on the property that understand that the property owner would like to use this, and they understand what the PACE program is. That written consent is basically that lender saying, we understand that this property owner wants to borrow, you know, a certain amount of money for their project. The bank, if it is willing and able, may lend that entire necessary sum on their own completely. You know, that is sort of the property owner's first and foremost, you know, goal is to finance their project. If the bank is unwilling or otherwise unable to give that borrower all the debt that they need to complete that project, that borrower will probably go to the market and look for another source of financing. And CPACE is meant to be an option for that property owner. And what that option does by levying the assessment that secures the amount of financing that companies offer, levying it in the land records allows those lenders to offer it at a lower rate of capital that you might otherwise see in what is deemed to be a mezzanine debt or second lien debt. which tends to be a little bit more expensive. Now, the lender would have to know and understand and consent in a written form, which is how it's handled by and large across most of the US. They would consent that because this is meant to act like a special assessment and be collected annually, if taxes are collected there annually or twice a year, alongside the regular property taxes, that if a property owner is unable to make that payment, which is meant to repay the financing, all that's ever due and payable is the annual amount, just like your property taxes, plus any fees or expenses that could accrue in the same manner as property taxes. And this allows property owners who know and understand the implications of not paying their taxes and assessments a clear understanding, and it allows the banks to understand that the entire amount of the PACE financing is not due and payable if a property owner misses a default. What is only ever due and payable is that annual payment. This is very unlike traditional financing, whereby, if you miss a mortgage payment or you miss a payment on your debt, the entire amount of the financing could be called and be due and payable. So that gives banks a little comfort. It allows them the opportunity to better understand what PACE is meant to do. And we get a lot of consent just through education of that and their willing consent to the property owner. We heard that there's sometimes objections from the Mortgage Bankers Association. We understand that, and allowing this sort of consent makes it very clear that this is voluntary from all perspectives. And because it is only that annual amount, the mortgage is only subordinate to that lien to the extent of the annual payment due. And again, that's just a clarification that allows the bankers to sort of understand and see that, this is going to be something that they can underwrite. This is going to be something they understand how property taxes work. They understand the implications of that. And if the mortgage lender, if the property owner misses this payment, misses their property tax payment, misses their special assessment payment, the bank could step up to make that payment on the borrower's behalf to keep their interest in their loan secure. So it is sort of just an education process between the lenders and the banks as the property owners bring these parties to the table to talk about the potential to obtain this type of financing. So those are some of the changes that I think that modernize. There's a number of other things that are around resiliency. We heard about that, and we heard about the cost of the project and the energy reports. These are all very standard and required across the US and other programs as well.
You have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm just trying to understand what the role of the municipality is and why they are a third party to this agreement between lenders and banks or fourth party. I don't know however many parties there are. But what's the role of the municipality? Why are they involved?
The municipality's participation is necessary because by statute in Vermont and other states, only those municipalities have the ability to levy in the property taxes this type of special assessment. So the power of the municipality to do that is what it lends into this process. So there's a what we call an assessment contract, whereby the property owner and the municipality typically sign, where the property owner says, I voluntarily would like to obtain this type of financing from this financing company. I would like you, the municipality, to record that financing in the property records as a lien at the property level. And here in Vermont, I think your statute contemplates that the tax collector would collect that annual payment. Let's say it's a 25-year financing, repayable over 25 years. The lien would stay on the tax roll. The lien would stay in the property records, and the annual amount would be collected by the tax collector and then remit to the private capital that had provided the funds. So,
okay, so they're doing all the work. But what's the benefit to the municipality? Why would they want to do this?
So PACE financing drives development of projects and allows property owners another type of financing that potentially helps projects come to completion at a lower rate than, as I said, if a local bank can provide all the financing that a property owner needs to get their property completed, build a new building, add to the property tax, or ever do all of that, the bank will do that, and you won't hear from PACE. But if the bank for some reason says, I can give you only 40% of the amount of that you need, and you need to go out and find another sort of 20% of your capital from somewhere else. That property owner could turn to a host of lending sources, but because of the security provisions of that assessment that's levied in the land records and the seniority that it has on that annual basis, akin to a property tax or to a special assessment like a water assessment or a sewer assessment, the financing that companies like mine can provide is typically at a lower rate than that next piece of debt. So it gives property owners the benefit of lower interest rate costs. And for the municipality, because it's collected like a property tax, like something they do every year, that's how they drive their revenue base at the local level. They know how to collect property taxes. It's not meant to be a burden. You can outsource, as was indicated, or some economic development agency or some agency at the local level might take on the administration of the project in terms of getting the documentation signed. But annually, it's meant to act in a similar fashion to property taxes or special assessments, which get sort of collected in a sort of ministerial manner administratively throughout the county.
And what is by doing this, what risks are the municipalities taking on? What happened? I still not clear why a municipality would do this. I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Vermont. Our municipalities are tiny.
Yes, yeah. So, and you know, I have the benefit of, I've gotten a lot of inbound inquiry into Vermont. I'm the person who sort of like runs the state programs and coordinates with state programs. We've had a lot of inbound inquiry into how is the pay statute in Vermont. We have a affiliate who's a USDA lender who does a lot of rural agricultural lending, rural lending in these areas. The opportunity for projects to get financing sometimes in more rural areas and smaller towns it's less than they can otherwise get in large cities, right? So the benefit is that these projects, which otherwise sort of have difficulty finding lenders, with this type of program, lenders are more willing to sponsor and step in and finance these projects. And from the municipality's perspective, the legislation can be written, all the documentation such that there's no liability assumed by the municipality. Again, it's really just meant to sort of be an add-on to the process that they already administer through the tax collection. And if they wanted to, they could actually, outsource that too and say, okay, well, we don't want to do the billing, someone else can do the billing. But these all have to be handled appropriately within the statute at the statutory level so that the lenders feel comfortable that the money that they are lending into these projects have a means of sort of being monitored and enforced in a way that's going to get their investors their money back reasonably.
Oh, sorry. Can municipalities charge a fee to cover their costs?
Sure. That's very standard. If there's incremental fees, that's part of what the projects will cover. You know, we understand that these are set up, so there's going to be fees and expenses. These are common across the US, so that it's not meant to be a burden in any way or to cause sort of municipalities to put front a lot of money to get this up and running. It really, as you indicated, the localities are small. You might see 5 projects in a 3-year period, but those 5 projects might come to the table, build economic development, build growth, allow a property owner to fund improvements that might not otherwise be feasible for them because of the benefits of the financing rates that inure because of the way it's administered through this property tax lien. So, and again, it's completely voluntary. It's sort of at the state level. It just allows the local municipalities to make these decisions on their own, whether they want to enact these programs. And typically what we see, especially for the smaller and more rural locations, is that it's driven through the interest of the local constituents. So you'll have property owners who really would like to use this financing. We have a few that would be happy to testify as this moves through as to the benefits to them as property owners within these jurisdictions and how they feel that this type of financing is better than some of the alternatives that they might otherwise have in the market.
I've got a question. So, as it stands right now, I think our draft does not envision third parties holding the debt. So I'm imagining that one of the recommendations you would have is to allow that, through statute.
That's right. I guess, because the statute exists currently in Vermont and has not been utilized to my knowledge, I feel that there's things that can be done to, like I said, modernize it and to create the interest in the program. You've addressed a couple of them. And again, this sort of enters back to the legacy. And when these early statutes were enacted, it was a much different market. And now we're contemplating commercial projects, which might exceed, a $50 million, not, a $5,000 sort of residential project or a $10,000 residential project. So the size and scale of the projects that we're talking about on the commercial side are potentially much different. And municipalities certainly have the ability to use their own funds. We've seen this through what sometimes municipalities will do is lend their bonding authority through a joint power authority or some other type of conduit financing. But typically the funding behind that comes from the private markets.
Great. I don't know if you had more that you wanted to share with us about. That's like if we had interrupted you, or we should just go to questions.
I'm happy to answer any, like I said, having worked through this with a few states, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I understand that it's new and different. But I think the keys are really just this very voluntary nature, not meant to be sort of an administrative or economic burden, but to grow sort of the economic base and provide, local constituents an option.
So can you walk us through the situation of what happens when a property owner is not making a payment, right? Like maybe they're not paying their taxes. Maybe they are not paying their special assessments. Maybe they're not paying both, or maybe they're not paying the special assessment. What happens then?
Sure. And I'll make this, and I apologize, I'm not an expert sort of in Vermont statutory foreclosure or any of the things the municipality does, but generally again, because it is not meant to be something new or different for the municipality, if the property owner misses a property tax payment, a special assessment payment, a PACE payment deemed to be a special assessment payment, typically we see reference back to the real property tax laws and the statute that sort of follow what that process is. So you'll have notice and cure periods to the property owner, the same as the bank would follow if the bank would the lender would get notice, the municipality would get notice that the property, they would know that the property owner did not make that payment. And then whatever that sort of enforcement provision under the local statutes are for missed real estate taxes or property assessment or other property assessments, that's the way the PACE follows. So it's not meant to sort of, you have to learn anything new. It already exists by statute and is currently, happening at the local level already.
Okay, and how are the interest rates for commercial PACE relative to market rates?
So it is very highly dependent, as you can imagine. All lenders, mortgage lenders, all lenders sort of risk-based price, right? So and we all know this when we go to buy our own homes, sort of location dictates price and rates. And so, but the PACE is, again, the way we see this working is because PACE is limited, as you see through the statute, that it can only be used for things that impact energy efficiency, renewable energy, or resiliency. It can't be used to fund the entire cost of building a building, right? It's going to be naturally constrained by those metrics. So you'll typically have, in the case of a new construction or new development of a building, you'll have a senior lender who is willing to come to the table and sort of say, well, they'll finance some proportion of that. PACE rates are meant to be reflective of that secured provision within the land records. So it may be lower than what the property owner is paying for their construction financing, which is kind of a 5-year construction and then a refinance. It might be a little higher than what they're getting from their bank if their bank is giving them sort of a construction to permanent financing, a 20-year. It really just sort of depends on the type of financing, but in all instances, it's going to be less than the second piece of debt that we call this second debt, mezzanine type level debt, that property owners use. Because in terms of what a property owner is putting forth, equity is the most expensive. Their own equity is going to cost them the most. And then you go down from there, and typically your local regional bank will have the best, rates for that borrower, and the borrower will look at the options in the market, and PACE kind of sits in between what they might get from their regional bank and what they would get from a mezzanine lender, or what's called a second lien or junior participant. So the rates right now are between 7.5% to 8.5% typically, whereas mezzanine debt might be in the range of 10 to 12%, to put it in perspective.
Can you say that one more time?
The rates currently are sort of in the market, depending on the type of property, as I said, could range between, and they're generally based off like a 10-year treasury rate, but call it like 7.5% to 8.5% to 9%, versus what you could see from a mezzanine lender, which is typically sort of that 10 to 12 to 13% type debt.
Okay. Other questions that folks may? Yes, go ahead.
At some point, it would be helpful for us to have a handful of like real world examples.
Of course, yes. And again, I think that's one of the big drivers is because of the voluntary nature, the inbound requests that we're getting come from property owners who want to develop projects in Vermont. So, it does work really well in a lot of states, and we're super excited to see if it could work here. And like I said, it's not for every borrower, but in the instances where it works, the borrowers have really liked it and tend to be, kind of repeat borrowers to our business.
Yes, go ahead.
So just wondering how VLCT would weigh in on this.
I think that is a good question. We should have them in on. Okay, other questions for now? I do have more questions. I have a lot more questions. But I'm gonna hold off for now. And I think we should move on. Okay, all right, thank you so much. And we'll continue to be in touch. Hey,
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Ms. Sullivan, welcome.
Thank you. Oh. For the record, I'm Ms. Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for having me. I may have already given you all, you may see like 3 copies of this from me at this point, but I'm going to reference the economic action plan, so I thought I would bring copies for folks who would like to know.
Yes, please.
Oh. Because I'm in the wrong one.
So I appreciate the opportunity to come in here and talk about commercial PACE. Start off, we are supportive of the intent of this legislation and appreciate your attention to looking at new tools to strengthen Vermont's economic competitiveness, modernize our building stock, and leverage capital to support business investment. Broader context, no surprise to anyone in this committee. Over the last several years, the federal efficiency programs, clean energy funding has played a significant role in helping businesses and property owners invest in important upgrades. That landscape has shifted. Federal dollars are more limited, more competitive, and less predictable. Many programs that businesses relied on are winding down, oversubscribed, and less certain. At the same time, our businesses are facing a rise in their operating costs, aging infrastructure, and increasing pressure to modernize buildings to remain competitive. Whether that's to control energy costs, meet tenant expectations, or make properties resilient in the face of climate impacts. And CPACE
You guys have been talking about this, so I'm just gonna use the short. CPACE offers a way to respond to that reality and help property owners make long-term investments that strengthen both the individual business and the broader economy. At its core, this is, as you've heard, a voluntary financing tool available to commercial, industrial, agricultural, nonprofit, and I think importantly, multifamily property owners. My understanding is the residential pace in Vermont is between 1 and 4 units. So when we're talking larger, especially our affordable housing projects, I don't believe they're applicable for residential pace as it's currently structured. It allows building owners to finance energy efficiency, renewable energy, and resiliency improvements that repay that financing over time through the property assessment. Importantly, that repayment term can align with the useful life of the improvement, which may not always be possible with traditional lending. It is not a state loan program, it's not a subsidy, and it's not a mandate on property owners or lenders. It's a framework that allows capital to flow into projects that may otherwise struggle to move forward because of the upfront costs or financing mismatches. From the Chamber's perspective, S138 is fundamentally about helping projects pencil out. Across Vermont, we hear from Vermont and business owners who want to invest in their properties, but face real barriers to doing the important things like energy upgrades, building envelope improvements, and resiliency investments that make sense over the long term, but upfront capital requirement can delay the project. CPACE helps address that gap. It reduces upfront costs, improves cash flow, and allows businesses to modernize without diverting working capital away from operation, payroll, or growth. This is particularly important in Vermont, where much of our commercial building stock is older, and where investing in existing buildings is critical to keeping our downtowns, village centers, and employment hubs viable. CPACE should also be viewed as a broader economic development tool. When projects move forward, contractors are hired, engineers, energy professionals, and skilled trades go to work. Local suppliers benefit. These investments support Vermont jobs and keep dollars circulating in our local economies. In addition, modern, efficient, and resilient buildings are more attractive to tenants, employees, and customers. That matters to the workforce recruitment and retention, especially as businesses compete for talent and seek to offer safe, comfortable, and forward-looking workplaces. S138 is well aligned with the priorities already identified in the Vermont Economic Action Plan. The action plan emphasizes the need to modernize infrastructure, improve energy efficiency, reduce operating costs for employers, and attract private investment without increasing public spending. CPACE directly advances each of those goals. It supports reinvestment in existing buildings, lowers long-term costs for businesses, and encourages private capital deployment, and strengthens the physical foundation of Vermont's economy. Rather than creating new policy directions, CPACE provides a practical tool to help implement priorities and that the state has already embraced. Vermont would not be breaking new ground by adopting CPACE. Dozens of states already operate successful programs that range of projects supported in this infrastructure. The written testimony I have submitted, which I think is posted, right? Has lengthy examples of how it's been used. I wasn't planning to go into that, but if you'd like me to, I can go into more, but in Connecticut, CPACE financing helped transform a former office building into Hotel Marcel, which is now recognized as one of the nation's first net zero hotels. So if you think about why a municipality would do that and take an office building versus having a thriving hotel, the revenue that runs into town, also the state. In Tennessee, historic theaters and downtown landmarks have been renovated using CPACE alongside tax credits. Across the country, everyday office buildings, manufacturing facilities, and mixed-use properties have used CPACE to fund HVAC upgrades, energy efficiency improvements, and resilience measures. These examples demonstrate that CPACE works not only for high-profile projects, but also the types of buildings that make up the backbone of our local economy. So it can be scaled from small business, the small project, to very large projects. We recognize the importance of getting the details right. and understand that lenders will have questions, and may propose refinements to ensure clarity and confidence around their position. And we support thoughtful technical adjustments that strengthen lending participation while preserving the core functionality of the program. Other states have navigated these issues successfully, and Vermont can learn from those models. And we'll stay committed to working constructively with lenders, program administrators, and policymakers to ensure this is implemented in a way that works for all parties. There isn't a silver bullet to deal with all of the infrastructure needs and climate needs that Vermont has ahead of it, but the more tools that we have in the toolbox, the better off we are in trying to address them as quickly as we can. Please let me know if you have questions for me. Full disclosure, I am not a CPACE expert. I am not a energy efficiency expert or a municipality expert, but I will answer any questions that I have and maybe raise some questions too. So new draft, I'm just trying to take in if there's anything else there.
It's good.
Can you give us some kind of an idea of the magnitude, how many of these systems are already could be taking advantage of this? I mean, we're gonna build solar, for example, it's still gonna have to meet the regulatory requirements. The power company's gonna have to say that they can accept the power.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take, I think with any project that you have in the commercial industrial space, it takes people working together, understand how do we bring in the power that we need. You already have these players at the table. This is really about how do we finance that picture that we've created of a modern, resilient, efficient building. So I think one new player that we might be bringing in is the administrator of CPACE, but otherwise, these are the projects that people are already envisioning. And if right now they can't get them to pencil out, if this tool allows that to happen, that's important. I think the question for the municipality, why would I do this? That's a great question that we need to answer to make sure that they are feeling good about it. And we have residential PACE already in place, so maybe finding out what Vermont municipalities are districts for residential PACE and how is it done. So,
Where is the administrative of CPACE?
what's that?
We have one in Vermont?
We don't have CPACE in Vermont, but we have residential PACE in Vermont, so our PACE has been, I think, since 2011 or 2000.
Well, and I can say that the uptake on residential PACE was nearly nothing. And I think there were some reasons for that, that made it unattractive. But it has been successful in these other states. So one of the attempts here, as Ms. Samai mentioned, was to update the statutes. Like they're really done that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate this attempt at an economic development tool. I'm putting my GovOps hat on, and I'm really concerned about any liability that municipalities might take on with this, and so I want to understand that better. And any risk that they're taking on and any work they're taking on, because our municipalities, especially our smaller municipalities, even our medium-sized municipalities are really stressed right now. And I don't want to put them at risk. I mean, in the other draft, maybe it's in the residential program, the mention of the full faith and credit of the municipality. That freaks me out. Like, I don't want our municipalities are already stretched and they're not, some of them are not super sophisticated, and I don't mean that as a negative, an insult to them. They just don't have the people and the staff. And if there are landowners or people who want to finance a project and get their town to vote for it, because our small towns, that can happen. And then the town takes on the risk, I will be really worried about that. So I just want to make sure that protections of our municipalities and therefore our taxpayers, because we would all pay if something goes wrong, are protected.
So I fully agree, and I think we need to ensure, if they wanted to, maybe that's an option, but I think in order for this to work, there has to be an option where it is not the municipality that is taking on that risk.
Yeah,
And one of the things that I feel like could be, that could make it attractive, as was mentioned, is if there is a way for them to charge for effectively providing a service,
yeah,
then that could be beneficial. That could be a mechanism for them to earn a little bit of money. So, well, I mean, I want to learn more.
yeah. And I think, when we look at municipalities take on that risk with tax increment financing, and I think it's also in check. Right, that full faith and credit has to be, if you're going for indebtedness, it's sort of ensuring that your taxpayers know we're taking this on. Now, I think something that's important in CPACE is that because it's with the property tax, not with the owner. If that owner goes bankrupt, the next owner of that property, the lien is still with the so it's with the property, not with the person. So payment will still be due on the property. Now, if the property is, there's still risk, but I think that takes a little bit of it away to say that it's, this is living with the property, these are rights to the property, less about the person. Yeah, I understand that. I still think there are here, so I wanna. Well, creating a new tool, I love that, but I want it to work in a way that people are gonna use it, so if municipalities are like. I'm just thinking of some of our municipalities that have, been the victims of all those floods. And they may want this kind of investment in their town, but they just can't take on this risk and this work. And it's unfair to ask them to do it. And I know it's voluntary, I understand that, but there still could be, pressure from groups to do it. So I just wanna, make some stuff that I think like efficiency moment in the RPACE program, if he supports the municipalities, but.
We can hear from them.
Yeah, so that's the case. And again, my written testimony for some of those examples of what are the projects that have been done with this, I've got a longer list of small business, larger commercial mixed use, redevelopment and sustainability, and institutional buildings that have different types of projects.
I'm just thinking out loud here, something that may be helpful is, I'm just flagging for myself, I suppose, is that it might be helpful to hear from a small town that had done this. So anyway, if we can get
Good Thunder, Minnesota could be the place we need to hear from. Good Thunder had a thrift store, lighting, changes generating meaningful energy savings, so.
They're out there. We'll try some in.
Yeah.
Okay. Super. All right. Thank you. Okay, so that is the end of our testimony today. We are done a fair bit early, which is great. And so unless there's anything folks want to share at this point, any conversation.
We have that.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Take the downtime.
Yeah, right. We started calling it time confected.